ring. So we started off with some really sad news. Jim the Anvil Neidhart unfortunately passed away a few days ago at the age of 63. Of course, Jim was a member of the Hart Foundation, the tag team back in the 80s that went one on one with the Brain Busters and the Killer Bees and the Bushwhackers. Then he had the new foundation with Owen Hart in the early 90s, and then the late 90s, that new Hart Foundation with him, Brett, Owen, Pillman, and the British Bulldog. Of course, the Anvil was the father of Natty Neidhart, who we know and love. But Brandon, you took a picture with them. You were on Total Divas as you plug on this podcast. Tell us what it was like meeting Natalya and Jim.
Well, I mean, since it was for Total Divas, there was the cameras there, so it was a little bit weird because they made us all sign the non-disclosure, or not the non-disclosure agreement, it's the agreement to allow your likeness to be on TV.
Yes.
And I mean, it was fine. I kind of felt like Natalya was kind of playing her niceness up a little bit because the cameras were there. But Jim, I think he was just there because get a paycheck and meet the fans. He was a little different, which you can see on Total Divas and all the other different stuff on the E Network. But this one, him passing away, was a little more special to me than the other wrestler deaths because this was the first ever wrestler that I've ever met that ended up passing away. I thought it was gonna be Ric Flair, but he kicked out at 2.5.
He kicked out at two ninths. It was crazy. Yeah, but Jim Neidhart. Yeah, so his death. I saw you retweeted or you tweeted R.I.P. Jim Neidhart, and I was like, yo, wait, what? He can't be gone, So I looked it up, and it was true. I've heard the dispatch call from the EMTs regarding Jim Neidhart, and then I've also looked it up, the details of how he died, and it's actually pretty sad. So his wife Ellie, or Elizabeth, Natalya's mother, daughter of Stu Hart, she says that he got up to change the thermostat, and he turned around and looked like he was about to do a weird dance, but he just collapsed. Then she immediately called 911. She believed he was having a seizure, which he was taking medication for. They say Neidhart had a 4-inch gash on his face when the EMTs arrived. He died later that day. And it said he had early sets of Alzheimer's, which is no surprise because especially now with all the CTE stuff going around, now that these wrestlers are starting to die, I mean, it's not as big as it probably should be as big of a deal as it is in football, but I don't think the wrestlers are kind of preserving their brains or committing to science. I know Kevin Nash, I think, committed his brain to science or whatever when he dies. Something like that. But a lot of the football players I know, unfortunately, they commit suicide and they shoot themselves in the chest because they want to keep their brain intact. And I mean, this is just kind of a sign of people. I mean, Chris Benoit, he had the brain of a 7-year-old Alzheimer's patient. He was in his 40s. So, I mean, concussions are no joke, man. And Daniel Bryan suffers from seizures as well. So, I mean, it can happen at any age. It can. Jim Neidhart, he was a 2-time WWF Tag Team Champion with Bret Hart. He had the feud of the year with the Hart Foundation versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in 1997. Jim, he got the name the Anvil, shot put or whatever, but he was the engine of that tag team than of that faction. And I don't know if you've seen that picture that's going around social media. It's all 5 members of the Hart Foundation, and Bret's the only one left. He's the last man standing. It's really sad, Pillman, Owen, Bulldog, the Anvil. It's a sad time in professional wrestling.